Hey everybody, welcome back. You probably remember a while back, I was out of Kansas and I was up in Wyoming, and we did a impromptu episode live from a Masonic Temple in Laramie, Wyoming. Well, tonight we got some of those guys back with us. We're in the studio this time, so we're not going to cut off from signal, but there's more of that story to be told, and we have some excellent brothers with us to help fill us in on just that history. So stick with us, because we have an amazing episode lined up for you right after this on Historical Light.
Welcome back to the Historical Light Masonic Podcast, dedicated to illuminating our past and bringing our Masonic history to light since 2016. And now, enjoy the show.
Good evening. Welcome back to Historical Light, an independent Masonic show focused on the historical events and aspects within Freemasonry. I'm your host, Brother Alex Powers, and we have some awesome brothers with us, Brother Richard Brown and Andy. I'm going to kill your last name. We're just going to call you Andy Mack, live with us from Laramie, Wyoming. They're in the Masonic Temple. Brothers, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
All right. I got to hear it. How do you pronounce the last name?
McCluggage.
Yeah, I wasn't going to get that. McCluggage. Now I know. Got it. Fantastic. So, man, stoked to have you guys with us. And I'm kind of jealous to see the temple behind you. I missed that building. It was really, really cool getting to go through there, have the opportunity to meet some of the brothers and hear the amazing stories. But in less than an hour, can't cover a tip of the history that you guys have with your lodge, with that amazing temple. So stoked to have you guys back on tonight so that we can cover just some of that.
Yeah, thank you for having us. It's amazing to be a part of this and showcase our lodge.
Yeah, there's a lot of history, in this building and in the state of Wyoming, and hopefully we can get through a little bit of it.
100%. And if not, we'll do a part 3, because I definitely want to hear the whole story. I know there's some really good stuff there. But before we dive in tonight, let's start off with some introductions. Just for those that maybe didn't see the last episode, let's hear who you guys are, your role in Freemasonry, and just a little bit about you. Brother Rich, let's start with you.
So my name's Richard Brown. My home lodge, my mother lodge is Torrington Lodge number 29 out of Wyoming. And I am a dual member as well here in Laramie, lodge number 3. So,
fantastic. Yeah. Thank you so much for being here. Brother Andy?
Well, Andy McCluggage. I'm the current senior warden here in Laramie. I've sat as worshipful master twice. My home lodge is actually in the great state of New York. My home lodge is Warwick number 544 in Warwick, New York. I moved to Wyoming early in 2007, and I was kind of a sojourning brother for a little while, and then I petitioned for a dual membership and became a member here late in 2008. So I'm also a dual member.
Fantastic, man. New York to Wyoming. That's quite the move. What prompted that?
Well, Long story short, I'm a geologist, and the typical answer I give is there's no better rocks than the ones in Wyoming.
Well, yeah, I can't argue with that. We saw some really cool ones up there, that's for sure. So I'm curious, do you guys have any family history in you, or not in you, but in Freemasonry prior to yourselves? Or what is it that brought you guys to Masonry?
Originally, I had no idea if I had family. And with further investigation and talking with elders of my family, my great grandmother and grandfather, I find out that a lot of my family, before they moved out to Colorado and Wyoming, they were originally from Chicago, and they were Masons out there in Chicago. Do I know which lodge? No, I do not. But I tell you what, I will find out. It is a journey to be had.
100%.
And for my part in that question, growing up, we had a grandfather who, when we would go down to their place for Thanksgiving, holidays, or whenever we got to see them, I remember seeing the square and compass and the G on various things like ashtrays or just trinkets around the house. I think that was probably my first inkling that somebody in my family was a Freemason. And then years later, me and my twin brother, we found out that both grandfathers and one great grandfather were Freemasons. Our father was not. And that's what got me interested, and I became a Master Mason, etc. And then a few years later, my twin brother followed suit, and I got to travel back to New York and help raise him. So a little bit of history there.
That's really, really cool. Well, fantastic, guys. I am stoked to get into the conversation again and kind of cover some of the gaps that we might have missed out last time. Before we do get into the meat and potatoes of tonight's episode, though, I want to throw out a big shout out to everyone that supports Masonic history. And for those that do, you can help support us because we are straight up Masonic history around here since 2016. And if you guys like to hear more like the stories we're going to cover tonight, that's what we're all about. It's kind of bringing those stories out from local lodges all around the world and really focusing, cherishing, preserving the history within Freemasonry. So you can head over to the website, historicallight.com/support, and find some awesome ways to get involved there. And it's right around the corner, guys. MasonicCon Kansas is coming back. It is going to be fantastic. Year 3, we have one heck of a lineup scheduled for this year. So do not miss out. In fact, head over to the website right now, MasonicConKansas.com, and you can still get your tickets. Look at the lineup, guys. We have some really, really cool guys on here coming in from even internationally. Got Brother Nicholas Lane coming back all the way from Canada. I've got some really, really killer speakers on there, and I know some of the topics that are coming is going to blow us away. So stoked to have you guys out once again. Head on over to MasonicConKansas.com, snag your tickets. This is an event that you are not going to want to miss. This is priced for the event, man. We're flying in all these speakers from all over the country and beyond, putting them up. So this is to put this on, bring a whole bunch of stellar Masonic education into one place at one time, and guys travel in from near and far. So it really has been called the Masonic Family Reunion, and I have to agree with that. If you guys have the opportunity, definitely come on out. We would love to have you. It's going to be an awesome time. With that, I'm stoked to get into the conversation. So what brought me around to hear about your guys' lodge in the first place is we were heading up to Laramie, Wyoming for a graduation of my niece. Went to college up there. And as Masons do, we get looking around when we're traveling and say, is there a lodge in the area? And found a really cool looking temple and reached out to some brothers and said, is there any way I can see inside this place? And it just so happened that while we were there, landed on an episode night. So, of course, me had the random idea of let's just do a live episode right then and there. We actually threw it on the phone as well and got to walk through the temple. We had a few little issues with some of the really thick concrete walls there, as most temples do. But we got some really, really fantastic history preserved and got the chance to explore this amazing temple. And you see a little bit behind us there. Brothers, what are we looking at behind you?
So I'll get up and read you what it is, but they are
Fantastic.
the swords from when I believe Otto Graham, and the jewels from when a gentleman named Otto Graham was the Right Eminent Grand Commander of the Commandery of the state of Wyoming. So yeah, you've got past Grand High Priest jewels here from a gentleman named Jesse Converse, who I believe was a gentleman who lived here in Laramie at one point or another. The stuff over here is Otto Graham's past commander's sword from when he was a member of our Yorkite Knights Templar body, Emmanuel Commandery number 3. And then these belong to a gentleman, Fred Miller, past Grand Commander of Wyoming, and F.G. Gaylord, past Grand Commander in Arizona. So, and actually, the Grand Yorkite medals that are behind us, I believe we were asked a couple months ago or last year if we would return those, because apparently there hadn't been any more minted. So they were canvassing the constituent bodies to see if they had any that we'd be willing to return to reissue. But in the meantime, I guess they found I guess it would be called the die to recast or mint new ones. So that became a moot point. Thankfully.
Oh, wow.
So
That's pretty cool.
These jewels up here that are Jesse Converse's jewels, his father was one of the first people to be on the charter for Laramie Lodge number 3 in 1870.
Wow.
Yeah, that's some fantastic history just right there in screenshot. You guys really picked a cool spot to do the episode from. That's awesome.
Yeah, we were afraid the library would be too echoey, and then the service in the actual lodge room would probably be non-existent. So we're right outside the secretary's office.
There you go. Man, so I definitely want to let you guys hop in and make sure we cover any gaps that we might have from last time. But one thing I want to highlight that I remember just being the coolest thing was the chairs still in use in your lodge room. You brothers tell us just a little bit about those, because those really blew me away. I mean, the architecture in the lodge room altogether, but those chairs really stood out to me.
I honestly don't know a whole lot about those chairs. I believe they are the original.
Yes.
The original chairs that were made when this building went into service.
1912. So the brothers in 1912, including the worshipful master at the time, had those chairs specifically made by a tailor and a wood maker here in town in the small town of Laramie at that time, specifically for the lodge room. The brothers that were here in the lodge actually outnumbered the amount of men that were that lived in town at that time, because brothers would come from all around Albany County to come to lodge. So,
that's fantastic.
But yeah, those chairs, they're all original to the lodge. And then the ones, if you remember correctly, they almost look like stadium chairs in the background.
Yeah.
Those are originally from the University of Wyoming's original basketball arena.
I did not know that. And
the lodge actually had those put the same leather cushions on those as we have on the others.
And so I know these guys watching the episode right now aren't having the joy of seeing that. Please go back and not right now, but later on, go back and watch the other episode, because we have some fantastic footage inside the lodge room capturing this. I'm trying to remember, correct me if I'm wrong, it may have not been your lodge room, but did you guys have like the corner rounded seats up there as well?
Yes.
That was pretty cool. I've never seen that in a lodge before, but it's so well.
There used to be enough brothers in the lodge for active members that we would not only fill those every single seat, but it'd be overflowing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, let's jump in. We covered a lot last time, just walking through the temple itself and kind of capturing those stories of, what we saw and some of, just the memories of the brothers that we were talking to. But let's jump in and what would we miss out on? What's the first topic we can jump in on?
So actually, I wanted to bring up this year's 150th anniversary for the Grand Lodge of Wyoming.
Fantastic.
And there are only 4 lodges in the state of Wyoming that are older than the Grand Lodge.
Mm-hmm.
And Laramie Lodge number 3 is one of those lodges that is older than the Grand Lodge of Wyoming. And the 4 lodges, including the one that no longer exists, South Pass, they're all being honored. And actually, anyone who is a Masonic brother can actually join South Pass Lodge because it's an honorary lodge.
Mm-hmm.
But all 4 of those are getting honored as in this year's grand session.
Yeah. And then I believe Laramie Lodge itself, or at least, the lodge had its 150th year dedication just a few years ago.
Yep. Yeah, we were originally founded in 1870.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, by the Grand Lodge of Colorado, as it were.
So out of the 3,
that's right.
So out of the 3 lodges, out of the 4, but 3 of those lodges were founded out of Colorado, but South Pass Lodge got their charter from Nebraska Grand Lodge.
Right on. That's cool. I totally forgot about that aspect. I remember we had that conversation because we have direct Masonic lineage there because Colorado was, originally chartered through Kansas and then to you guys. So that's really cool to see that direct lineage, heading west. Awesome. Now, I know today, a big part of the town out there is the college. Remind me, when did that college start, and did that have a lot to do with early Masonry there, or what drove the population to that area?
So actually what founded Laramie in the first place was Union Pacific Railroad and the extensive amount of cattle ranching. If you remember correctly, Wyoming was based on the cattle barons that ran the West. And in Cheyenne is where they would actually, that's where they put their headquarters. That's where all the cattle barons in the world put their headquarters, was in Cheyenne, Wyoming. And that, Union Pacific was coming through. And as soon as Union Pacific came through, Laramie became a huge hub for trafficking cattle and silver ore.
Yeah.
So
fantastic.
It was mostly railroad.
Yes.
And then I believe the University of Wyoming was founded in 1886.
Okay.
I think you're right.
I think it was, and I know a lot of the university, even to this day, I believe a lot of the university's departments and majors are related to mining, oil drilling, using the Earth's natural resources. There's a natural resource department or whatever. And a lot of, I don't know about back then, in the late 1800s or early 1900s, but we had a sister lodge, if you will, that shared this building with us. It was a body called Gem City 52. And you had Laramie Lodge number 3 and Gem City 52 that shared the same building. And the propensity for one group's members was to be members of the the Western Research Institute, or the Bureau of Mines,
yep,
which later became the geology department or the mining department at the University of Wyoming.
They're under the same umbrella now.
So it seemed like a lot of the brethren in one, either through coincidence or by design, a lot of them were faculty of the University of Wyoming related to minerals, mining, and oil.
So
wow.
To relay even more, all of the buildings at the University of Wyoming, all the cornerstones of every single building has been done up by the Grand Lodge of Wyoming, and before the Grand Lodge of Wyoming, Laramie Lodge number 3. And if this is even more interesting, the first Grand Lodge session was held at this lodge in 1904. And they, out of all the Grand Line officers, 5 of those officers were from Laramie Lodge number 3.
And I think it was so long ago that it wasn't even Wyoming yet. It was
Wyoming territory.
It was the territory. So it was the Grand Lodge of the territory, not the state of Wyoming. Because Wyoming's statehood was what, July 10,
1890.
1890. So really cool stuff. I mean, we've got loads of history books, and as part of the Grand Lodge's 150th year anniversary, I believe it was the Grand Historian, has asked the constituent lodges to gather their histories to send to the Grand Lodge for them to include in. I'm assuming they're putting together a book, but awesome. We have our own history book. Well, I don't think each lodge is fortunate enough to have one, but you see that one goes through 1970, and our current historian, Ron Van Ekeren, has been working on gathering the data to fill the gap between 1970 and present. Yep. And there's a lot to go in there.
Yeah.
A whole vault full.
Yeah. A whole vault full. Right.
So I'm curious, with the celebration coming up, is there anything in plan to hold anything at the Laramie Temple? I mean, that's a cool connection, seeing the first meeting was held there and all.
Sadly, no.
I think any commemorations, I think, will probably be done at the Grand Communication this summer.
Okay.
And I don't think the Grand Communication is in Laramie this summer.
No.
I can't remember. So they'll probably do some some special events there. I'm sure there's going to be much ado, though, for sure.
Big hubbub.
No doubt about it, man. That is cool. That is cool. A lot of good stuff coming up. Amazing to hear that you guys are taking those steps to keep that history preserved and not just shoved in a back closet like so many lodges do. So good on you guys for getting that out there and making sure it's preserved for years to come.
Well, I think part of what we have going on here, when you and Rich and a couple others first did this in the fall, it brought to my attention how little I actually know about, the deep history. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's luckily it's been recorded in text, but I don't think a lot of the brothers are aware of how rich and full our history is. And
sure.
Like I said, it just brings to my mind that maybe in future lodge meetings, part of the Masonic education part, we should read excerpts from our history book, because like so many other things, it will be lost to antiquity. Had Rich not mentioned this show, or mentioned, hey, do we have a history of our building and our brethren? It would be lost. So I think, if nothing else, this revives at least some impetus to look back to where we came from.
Yeah.
And just in some of the excerpts Rich, has clued me in on over the past couple weeks, it's like, there's all kinds of stuff in this book that was done through the 1920s or the 50s or the 60s, like Masonic balls, past master clubs, other ancillary or auxiliary bodies that weren't necessarily Masonic, if you will. But, the question needs to be brought up, I think, in our lodge room. Does anybody remember when this was a thing, these things, and why did we stop? And what can we do to start this again? Because, and I know you've talked about it because you're a brother Mason, so many of us take time out of our day to come down here and participate in the business meeting, as we're obligated or even required to do. But a lot of time, the fellowship aspect is lost.
Yeah.
And I think if we could come up with a way to do something Masonic, like a past masters club, dinners, breakfast, whatever, without the rigmarole or the rubric of sitting in a hot lodge room, I think that would be a great thing for Masonry worldwide.
Yeah,
Definitely.
I don't know if any brethren from Warwick Lodge are on. My twin brother was going to try to get the word out about this podcast, but like they do like a cigar and bourbon group or something.
Sure.
Where like periodically they just get together and hang out and taste bourbons and smoke cigars. It's
right.
And I think that's what Rich and you met Phil last time you were here. So many of the younger guys,
Yeah, in Masonry, that's always in quotes, right?
like I'm 40 years old, and I'm like, well, now that Rich is here, I'm like the second youngest guy. But like, we want to see, like, we don't just want to toe the line, right? We want to grow it. And I know Rich and Phil and some of these other new, even prospective guys, they're amped up about it. They want to get the word out. You pointed out it's a university town. That has its pluses and minuses.
Sure.
We've had plenty of great guys, young men come through this lodge, and I did it myself. I graduated college and I moved away. And so I can't fault anybody for doing that. But it's hard when you bring such a great, an individual with such great character and such great attributes, and they're energetic. They want to be involved. They want to help. And you're like, this is awesome. And then they're like, oh, well, I graduated college and I got a job in Gillette. Well, that's going to be great for the lodges in Gillette. I guess that's the takeaway, right? Because if you're producing a good Mason, even if he doesn't stay in your lodge, you've still produced a good Mason.
Man, so many amazing points there. So first and foremost, just to hear that Historical Light has played some little part in getting Masonic history going in different parts of the country, fantastic. That warms my heart. Man, so many great points there. For one, what you're talking about with, doing cigar clubs and stuff like this, and looking back to these community socials that we used to hold. Yeah, even my lodge in Gardner, Kansas, which you can imagine in the late 1800s was, it's a smaller town today. It's on the cusp of the Kansas City metro, but we're out on the edge of civilization here. So you can imagine in that time, this place was out in the middle of nowhere. But when you look in the history, we held all these things called bazaars, and it was, just half the community out here. They have times recorded with almost 200 people in that room. I don't even know how that's physically possible, but it really goes to show the community aspect outside of those meetings and how important the lodge was in the community that time. I think a big concern and fear of brothers today is when they see all this stuff like, the cigar socials, this and that, they think, oh, it's going to take over Masonry. And that's what Masonry is going to be. But man, there's so many different sides to it because, I can't remember. I think it was like Lexington Lodge #1 that made this reference, but they're a smaller knit lodge, smaller membership, and they're doing such a great job, like better than any other lodge in the state there. And the Grand Lodge wanted to use them as an example and say, hey, but we need to drive more members. And they said, no, we don't want more members. They wanted a small lodge. And their reason was, we know everybody that's here. We don't just have guys on the books where a lot of lodges have, hundreds of people, but you got your 12 that They just want the 12 because it was more brotherhood for them to say, Brother Rich went to my daughter's graduation. Brother Andy, when my son broke his knee, showed up to the hospital, right? Like, I know these guys, they know my wife, they know my kids. We have that bond. But Brother John Doe that's on our roster, but I've never met him before. It's hard to give a crap about him, right? And you don't have that connection. And that's where these events, I think, come into such an important part, because even when those 12 guys do come to lodge, if that's all you got, what do you really know about those guys outside of, well, I know Rich from Thursday nights, but we don't get into much more. But when you have those outside of business meeting experiences, you bond.
Yep.
You get families involved. You start to know each other on a deeper level. And that's, I think, where brotherhood thrives. You know, 100%. Masonry doesn't have to just be a meeting. It can be a lifestyle.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, we're sitting here talking about things that we used to do. I mean, in 1904, we had the first annual Masonic ball for Laramie Lodge number 3. And just right here, it says 206 people showed up to this from the community and the Cheyenne, Wyoming. They traveled. So think about this, 1904, and they traveled from Cheyenne. It takes me 45 minutes to an hour to get from Laramie to Cheyenne. And think of this, those people had to travel a day, essentially, in 1904 from Cheyenne to Laramie.
Well, not just that, but you guys are in the part of the country where, I mean, before like the modern road set in, you can kind of wonder the obstacles you got to get through in that
also,
part of Wyoming in that time.
You have to remember as well, in 1904, we still had, we still had people, not necessarily like Billy the Kid, but we had bandits and miscreants running around. They would find you on the road and they would rob you. I mean, you were taking a risk when you traveled. It wasn't just jumping in your car and going from point A to point B 10 miles down the road.
Yeah, especially at night, to those events, for sure.
So, I mean, these people, they had 206 people show up to this first Masonic annual ball. And the governor of Wyoming, the mayor of Laramie, you had several senators show up. I mean, these were people of renown. And then from the town locally, you had the local priests, you had the local, anyone and everyone was invited. You didn't just have to be Masonic to show up. And so they brought in the first Masonic ball, they brought in something like $5,800 in here.
Wow.
And that was just for charity work and for the local Masonic relief of brothers.
Yeah. Well, what's amazing about that? I mean, so you guys have a much larger Masonic temple than like here in my hometown. But still, to think about 200 plus people in the building, like that's quite a to-do. Like in today's world of Masonry, that's like Grand Lodge annual session numbers, right? Like you don't see lodges pulling hundreds of people to events anymore. And that's just amazing to think about, especially in those time periods. Like that's how pivotal our lodges were in the community scene.
Well, and think about this as well. In 1904, this temple, the one that we sit in currently right now, wasn't even built. We were in a temporary lodge above a grocery store. And we were there for 20 years above this grocery store. We didn't get this temple that we reside in now wasn't built until 1912.
That's right.
And we had spent darn near, I think, almost 30 some odd years jumping from 6 different lodges or 6 different places around town, including the Elks, the one of the churches here in town. We did it also above Ivinson Bank downtown on 2nd. We did it above one grocery store for 20 some odd years.
Yeah, and once in a while we'll commemorate those earlier times. We'll do a full moon lodge.
Yes.
Nice.
Where we'll keep the lights. Essentially, the lights are all down really low, except for we'll use oil lamps around the altar, and we'll wear period clothing. So we all dress as cowboys or whatever people wore in the late 1800s. Yeah, and basically we do business, but then we jump into the history of it where there's a poem, I believe it's called Above Simpkin's Store.
Yeah,
which you may know it, which relays the hardships of having to ride your horse to lodge, and it, you know, takes all day to get there, and it's cold and smoky, and I think it's time we do that again, because that's in fact, I think the last time we did that was my first year that I was really involved here.
So what, 14 years ago?
It was some time ago, and you know, Wayne wears his all like,
oh yeah,
and there was actually a I can't remember his name. He was actually a soldier, a current United States Army soldier, and he was in some sort of special detail, probably a funeral detail, where they wear garb from the late 1800s.
Yes.
So he would come and he would wear like an 1880s cavalry uniform, and it was really cool to see. Lots of leather vests, cavalry uniforms, spurs. Everybody's got a smile. Everybody's got a smile on their face. They really do. Yeah. And it's stuff like that we have to remember. That's where we came from. Back in the day, my great grandfather didn't have the luxury of hopping in a car with a heated steering wheel and heated seats and come to the lodge.
Yep.
Come on, you're that so many bad grandfathers. He was over in Scotland. I don't think he had the luxury of much.
Probably not. But it just, for some reason, it's just in my head. Just recently, it's been like, well, and even our treasurer brought it up the other night. We're carrying the work, or I guess we should say everything we do has been born on the weight of our forefathers, the weight on our forefathers' shoulders, so it's been entrusted to us to care for that, the institution, and honor where we came from by keeping it alive the best we can. And for some reason, it just this past week, it's really spoke to me a little bit of what we can do to really honor our forefathers. And I think it's keeping the history alive, even like excerpts from this book, a couple paragraphs read to a room full of brethren. I mean, I guarantee 95% of the guys in that room are going to have an aha moment.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got one right here, if you don't mind.
No, go for it.
All right. So
wait, you're going to share history on Historical Light?
Oh, who would have thought? So the following lines, evidently an adaptation of the poem by Robert Morris, were read at a banquet, the first annual Masonic Ball, February 10th, 1904. We meet upon the level, we part upon the square. How fraught with genial brotherhood these words Masonic are. Hands round then, brother Masons, form the bright fraternal chain. As now we meet upon the level, to part again upon the square. We meet upon the level, we part upon the square. And that's a shortened version of it, but it's a as Brother McCluggage has just got done saying, the research into history, this podcast got me severely interested in my own lodge's history. Because in all honesty, yes, we have a historian, and he is a wonderful, he's a library of knowledge, but his knowledge is not shared unless you actually, if you have the time to sit down with him. And a lot of times no one does.
Right.
And so going through myself and taking the time when I'm sitting in a hotel room because of my job, I'm able to read this stuff. I'm able, to take the time and give it the effort. And I'll hand it to you. This podcast has lit a fire under me, and I love sharing that fire in lodge and outside of lodge with brothers and non-brothers alike.
That's fantastic. That means the world. And, hearing you guys say, like, the idea of sharing excerpts out of the book at a meeting, I think that's fantastic because, like you said, pretty much every lodge has a historian or has that guy, right, that knows the history. You got some guys that don't really care about the history, that don't want to get lectured on it. And I think that's maybe where it hits a fault sometimes, is when we talk about history, it turns into an hour-long lecture, and maybe, that's too much for guys. But there's a massive importance not just for the sake of history itself, but to understand the story of your lodge, the personality of your lodge, all those brothers that went through there before you, because it really lends in to the importance of what you're doing today. Like, you guys aren't just in a cool building on the corner on a, Tuesday or Thursday night just because. Like, there's something to this, and there's been something to it for a long time, that in pretty much any city around the country, around the world that you look into, some of the most influential men in those communities were members of those lodges. Like, there's something to that. And I think that really, to go back and share that, and share how your lodge impacted the community, drives home, man, I need to take this a little more serious. Because maybe it's not just about why Alex is a member of this lodge, but when I'm looking back in the first surgeons of the town, the first mayors, the first sheriffs, all these influential guys, you're looking into the creation of the state. A lot of those guys were Masons. And why? It really drives home, there's something here. And I love the aspect of, just sharing like an excerpt and those small micro doses of importance, because it doesn't get shared. And then we end up in this state of constant recovery. Our history wasn't a mystery. Our history was known, but it just didn't get passed on. So we're in this constant state of recovering it and re-finding it out. And as a guy that loves history, but also is focused in archival, it drives home, because we're in this constant state of recovery, we're also not looking forward and saving today as the history of tomorrow as well as we could, because we're always focused on recovering what's behind us before it's gone forever. And it turns into that nasty loophole. But if we can get into that habit of just passing that story along as we go, it keeps everybody in the loop. And then those efforts can be placed on the history of today.
Yeah, absolutely. It reminds me of, and we all had to read the book The Giver when we were kids. You remember The Giver? Maybe you've seen the movie. It's like there's no quick way to do it, right? There's no quick way to educate any one person on 150 years of history.
Right.
And by the time you're done doing that, well, it's already time for you to do that to somebody else. You know what I mean? So I think that there needs to be a step forward, even just little steps at a time, before we're to the point where it's like, 2030, and all of the historical knowledge we've had the privilege of having up till now is gone. Because I could very easily see it in 10 years, me, Rich, maybe a couple of the guys that were young now but are going to be old then, and like brand new guys sitting in the lodge room with no idea of what our roots are, except for what's recorded in this book and what's in our memories.
Yeah.
Because I think people don't often realize that when you have that one person, whether it's at work or at the lodge, that has the historical knowledge because they've been there for 30 plus years and had their hands in everything in those 30 years, when that guy retires or eventually passes away, that's it.
Yeah.
You can't go get that information back. You can't call them at home and say, hey, remember when this happened? How did that all shake out? Because he gone.
That's true.
So I think we don't often think about it, but like I said, just the past week or so, I've been starting to think about it seriously, because me and Rich and a couple others are going to be the stewards of this information come 10 years from now.
Yeah.
Because the reality is the brothers that we do have in our lodge, as amazing and wonderful as they are, there's not a lot of them that are below the age of 75.
Sure. Yeah. And that's common.
And the reality is when they're gone, are we going to be able to retain their knowledge?
Yeah.
That's why, as I slowly become more and more involved in the lodge, I mean, I'm the senior deacon, and all I want to do is take all of our knowledge, all these books that we have, all the knowledge from the brothers that we have in the lodge, and put it in electronic form. That way, if something does happen, say the lodge floods or there is a fire, it's
Yeah.
we have that at our disposal.
Yeah.
And it's just a hard pushback. We just bought our first new laptop in, what would you say, Brother McCluggage, almost 15 years?
I don't know what Windows is on this. The Windows on my work computer is a Windows 7.
Okay.
That's got to be like
95.
like the OG Windows.
Yeah.
In there.
Did it come with the chisel and
It's making itself better day by day.
So luckily through Rich's efforts this past year on Black Friday, we were able to acquire an appropriate machine for Word documents and Excel and all that stuff. So we're moving forward slowly.
And kind of what you guys are covering here is why I love doing this show and why we started this in the first place, right? Because when we look back to the history of Masonry, so much of the time we have to depend on our minutes. And for Masons, we're able to kind of read between the lines and understand and get a picture that a lot of other people wouldn't be able to, because we kind of know the process and the flow that goes along with that. So we can connect a lot of dots. But even then, we know that the minutes don't cover a lot, right? There's so much that goes on that aren't or is not recorded in those minutes. And then we think about everything that maybe happened after the meeting and in between meetings. And that's why it becomes so important to me in that effort of recording the history of tomorrow, or the history of today as the history tomorrow, in that modern means. And like this, sitting down on video with Rich and Andy, because in 70 years, guys aren't going to know what your opinions were in this time, and not just that, what your expressions were. What was his personality like?
Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, we started doing, through Historical Light and the Kansas Lodge research, we started doing past Grandmaster interviews where we'll hop on an episode just like this, and we'll just work through the entire Masonic journey of our past Grandmasters. And we've started doing this as an exit interview as well, because we're trying to capture our past Grandmasters still alive. And I'm like, man, we're always going to be behind the ball on this. Yeah. So now, as they're going in the week before it switches over, we do an exit interview, and we start out with that Masonic. What brought you to Masonry in the first place? Did you have that family history? We work through their time in Blue Lodge, their time as an officer, their time as a district deputy, and all the way up, and cover that entire Masonic history, because I'm that nerd that would have loved to see that on our first Grandmaster, Richard Reese. Like, we've got papers that he's written, and you can kind of imagine how he said it, but we'll never have that to be able to go back and, what was his sense of humor like? How would he have said this in person? And how did his tone come across? And what was that personality like? So to be able to, sit down with brothers like you and brothers from all over is so vitally important. And I think we need to invoke that into how we record the history of our lodge as well, because I know personally, some of the most enjoyable and educational moments of Masonry with me has been after lodge, sitting down with that 92-year-old and just having that random conversation and seeing where it goes. You'll learn so much about Masonry through his experience and eyes. And I think that's just fantastic to be able to do that and include that in your lodge history.
Rich just brought up a good example. We had he was a cantankerous old brother. He was an Army veteran, disabled. He was disabled owing to an actual injury that occurred to him when he was in the service. I believe he did underwater demolition and was pinned underwater and had an embolism or a stroke, and so he was a little disabled, and then obviously never acted like that, and we'd never say that.
Right.
But when I first started attending lodge, you notice it. You're like, oh, I wonder what that guy's deal is.
Yeah.
And I got to know this gentleman. Kenny was his name. And man, he was just as ornery as you could imagine. And like that he would say stuff that it's like, oh my, I don't know this guy sometimes. but Kenny, he passed away actually last night. And there's only so many of us that remember him now. Wow. Rich never really got the chance to meet him. Nope. So owing to what you're saying, the minutes is only a portion of the whole, because it's not what happens in the conducting of the lodge to me that makes Masonry special.
Right.
It's like what you said. It's getting to sit with the Kenny Johnsons and getting to sit with the 92-year-old guys. I don't know if you recall this, but if you walk through our lodge room, on either wall, there's photos of all the past masters.
Yeah.
Going back to the very beginning.
I mean, there's probably
3 or 4 not there.
There's probably 150 photos on the wall. Yeah. And you just go, grab an old guy, and you go down the line, and you look at these guys. It's, hey, well, what was this guy's deal? What did he do? There's just things that stick out. Like there's a guy on the top row, a couple photos in, like 1919, I think it's a United States Army or Air Services or something uniform. And it's like, wow, man, I wonder what his story is. Or even on the other wall.
Yeah, the Colonel.
Colonel Ed Brown. Yeah. I guess he was a Vietnam veteran. Both of his pictures, he's in his past master pictures, he's in his Marine Corps uniform with his decorations. And luckily, that wasn't so long ago that people still remember him.
Yeah, that are in the lodge currently.
And he was another guy. Well, I don't remember much about him, but he was a member of 52, and it's just the important thing is keeping those dudes' memories alive, because at one point or another, you're more than likely going to sit in the East, and you're more than likely going to have a picture of yourself on the wall. 50 years from now, 21-year-old kids might say, well, what did that guy Andy do?
Yeah.
Or what was Rich's deal?
And the biggest thing is we're sitting here talking about what people are going to ask, well, what did this person do? Or what did that person do? Well, the real question is, what can you get done as a master lodge in a single year? Yeah. So the reality is what did that person help over the course of so many years?
Yeah. The
producing
big picture.
That singular lodge. And it might be a group effort. It's just, I personally really do believe that a lot of Masonry, we've got to get with the times. Yeah. And we've got to.
That's a lot of it.
We have two kids right now. Well, they're not kids; they're young men. Excuse me. We have 2 young men that are petitioned the lodge, and I'm Brother Andy and I, both of us are going to be on the committee for the both of them, and they're young. They're what, 21, 22?
2002 and 2003 birthdays.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I mean, they're young and they're in college right now, and the sad part is some of the brothers in the lodge, some of the older brothers in the lodge, they're weary to bring college guys into the lodge because, like we talked about earlier, they may end up leaving because they will probably get a job not in Laramie. So
sure, but is that a point to pass up?
Oh no, 100% not. My opinion is I want to see more of these young men, whether they leave or not. The lasting impression in the history of this lodge, we kind of like a heat stamp. We should be pressing that into them all the way through from entered apprentice all the way to the master mason's degree, and then further on, all the time that they're here. Because when they leave this lodge and subsequently when they do, they should be able, when they go to their next lodge, they should have such fond memories and history to tell about us and this lodge that they'll want to come back.
Yeah, and even to Rich's point about even if they do leave, you hope they go on to become a good master mason.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Our most illustrious Grand Master of the Council of Cryptic Masons of Wyoming visited us Wednesday night.
It's been a busy week.
And his comment was, of course, the Yorkite bodies, they always want to see more people coming to the Yorkite bodies.
Yes.
Sure.
Absolutely. And his point was, guys, we got to grow our membership, and that starts with you guys in the Blue Lodge.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So bringing more people into the Blue Lodge it's a win-win for all the bodies.
And as of right now, Laramie Lodge number 3, every 4th of July, we do a ice cream social essentially at Washington Park. And,
nice.
And we've been doing that, from my understanding, the last
close to 30 years, we've served ice cream,
free ice cream,
it's
to the public, and we serve over 6,000 or 7,000 ice cream cones last year.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I mean,
it's a lot of scooping.
Yeah, it's a lot of scooping. And next to the ice cream, we will have again this year, because I'm leading it up. But last year was the first year that they had a booth right next to it for not just the Blue Lodge, but pamphlets for the independent bodies, history,
sure.
Right there for the public, whether they wanted to see it or not. It was right there for them to look at. And then we had 2 of our brothers that were very knowledgeable up there at that booth, giving that knowledge out for free.
Yeah. Well, what it kind of crosses my mind is just such the potential and possibility that's there with the college in town. I mean, yeah, some of those guys won't stay in town, and I know, we've got KU not too far from us, and I've heard some, concerns of guys getting, kids from college, they're partiers and this and that, but at the same time, think about the impact Masonry could have on them at that pivotal point in their life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The positive experience and connections that Freemasonry could offer. And I mean, we talk about making men better, like what a perfect point in their journey to give them a community to embrace and a connection to go off of. Just amazing possibilities there.
Well, I mean, I was in college, I was a part of the Sigma Chi fraternity. And every now and then, whenever I'm on campus, I'm able to go, and I go into the Sig house, and I sit down with brothers all the time that are at university right now, and we have discussions. I invite them down to the lodge for dinner, and just make it known that we're here. I think that's one of the biggest problems, is that we don't put ourselves out there. It isn't about bumping our chest and saying, "Oh, we did this and we do that." It's more or less, making a point that we're even still here.
Well, and I think some of that, like what Rich is saying, is getting your name out there. Like you don't have to drill them or run it down their throats or anything. A lot of it is even operationally this building,
right?
The exterior of this building. That sign out front, we've got plans to replace that sign with probably a sign that's going to be more
all digital.
Yeah,
nice.
Digital. You can put info on it. Clean up the front of the building. Because right now this building doesn't stand. It stands out to us because we're Masons. Yeah. And even probably on my first pass through town, I was like, oh, I wonder if that's a lodge. In fact, I think I did say that. But just to the college kid, I mean, downtown, you drove through Laramie, the college is there, downtown is there. In order to go get your drinking on, you necessarily have to pass this building. So even if you could draw a college man's attention to this building and get him to the door where he can see phone numbers or addresses, that's better than what we're doing now.
I've got to ask, are you guys pissing off the ghosts over there, or what's going on?
It's our wonderful heating and heating system and water system.
Yeah, I wish we could change that.
The past masters have arrived to tell their story.
Every night about this time.
Yeah.
Well, it's that perfect, like, ominous historical banging on the pipes sound. These two yahoos are not telling our history right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
That is fantastic. Well, guys, I would love to have you on again. You're two guys that I could chat with for hours. We are at the top of the hour, and we typically wrap up this show with a toast. So I'm wondering, would you guys be willing to provide a toast for us this evening? Oh, I love that. What was the story behind that?
These are Robert Burns Masonic Table Lodge.
What year is yours?
Mine is last year.
Yours is last year. Mine's 08. 08 and 2014.
Yeah.
So
Love it.
maybe you guys didn't cover it. So every 2 years, the last weekend of January, the lodges in Cheyenne, Wyoming, put on a Robert Burns table lodge and dinner.
Okay.
Where we eat haggis, and the whole nine.
Sure.
So that's where these cannons come from. They came from the Robert Burns table lodge and dinner.
Fantastic. Well, I'm using a toasting cannon. You're not going to be able to see it too well. From our last Masonic Guild, which was the replacement for our Leadership Academy. They said, we want to take this back to the root. And they thought the Masonic Guild was the way to do that, get back to business. So that's where we typically at Leadership Academy, they always have a big table lodge the night before. So that's where this one came from.
Oh, Leadership Academy.
Yeah, they do amazing work out there in Kansas and Nebraska.
Man.
And Missouri, maybe.
Missouri. Okay.
We'd love to get you guys out here sometime. Maybe for MasoniCon. That would be awesome.
I've been really pushing it. I hope I've been really pushing it, trying to get a bunch of brothers together, jump into some vehicles and drive out there for MasoniCon.
We would love to have you guys. Would love to have you guys. All right. We got a toast for this evening?
Well, you're our
no
elder
pressure.
here.
No pressure.
Elder. I'd say I'd like to make a toast to keeping our history alive while making new history moving forward.
Love it.
Cheers.
Hear, hear. Cheers.
Here.
Fantastic. Making new history moving forward. Love that,
Right
brothers.
on.
Well, we have covered some amazing stuff tonight. Fantastic conversation. Would totally love to have you guys on again. Like I said, you're two I could definitely chat with for hours. So if you're down for it, we will make that happen.
Well, absolutely. Rich and I, we can't be kept together because we'll sit here all night.
Yeah, it's a problem with our wives.
Not a worries at all. Well, we will make that happen. You heard it here, folks. We're going to have a part 3. We're going to make that come true and get it on the books officially for sometime down the road, 2024 here. But brothers, totally want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for taking time out of your busy schedules. Thank your families for letting us borrow you away a little bit. And thank you to the ghosts in the background banging on the pipes. Truly some amazing history in that lodge with all the brothers there. If any of you are around the Laramie, Wyoming area, I urge you definitely stop in, say hello, and check out the amazing temple and get a feel for some of the history there. Go back and watch the other episode that we did. We walked through the entire temple. We look at the lodge room, all the rooms. Fantastic stuff there. So if you get the chance, definitely stop in and say hello. But with that, we'll see you guys in 2 weeks. And until then, keep preserving the history of Freemasonry. Have a great evening.